Hi, this is Dr. Frank with the Church of Rational Truth. Today's lecture, we're going to talk about new obesity medications that are really fresh, really new. They've only been out for a couple of years now, and they are GLP-1 agonists and GIP agonists, or combination agonists. These medicines work by kind of working on the receptors that are stimulated when we are full or when we have too much blood sugar already. That is a gross oversimplification of how these medicines work. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but that's kind of the quick and easy way of explaining how they work to people who are laymen or who don't know much about the endocrinology or all the hormones that go into hunger and sugar metabolism. But that is kind of the gross oversimplification of it. These medications started coming on the market a couple of years ago, and I've only started using them in my practice for a year-ish, maybe 2 years, if I can think back to when I first started prescribing them. They were originally medications used for diabetes, or a lot of them got approved for diabetes first. The GLP agonists are now getting approved for weight loss because they saw when they were using them in people with diabetes, they saw a substantial weight loss that they were able to keep off. And that is a miracle in terms of weight loss drugs, because if any of you have struggled with weight loss or tried medications for weight loss, it's very hard to get the weight off and keep it off. Usually you lose the weight and then you, even with medications, eventually gain it back or you overeat to compensate. These seem like they have, at least in the few studies that have been done, longer or more drastic weight loss associated with them. Talking a little bit about prior therapies, in terms of medications, there weren't many that were amazing. There were some that kind of worked a little bit, especially short term, but there weren't many really good medications that worked long term or with drastic weight loss. They only worked like a couple of percentage. It was hard to get more than 5 or 10% and continued 5 to 10% weight loss with these medicines. They were usually working on either stimulants were very big, where they would suppress your appetite when you took them, things that are amphetamine derivatives or something similar to amphetamine derivatives. Not all of them were amphetamine derivatives, but they'd work like that. They would give you energy, focus, and decrease your appetite, but that only worked for a short term, and most people would overwhelm that eventually and start eating and gain the weight back. There's some other medications that would inhibit your ability to absorb food in certain ways. We're not going to get into orlistat. We're not going to get into other medicines that just kind of fill up your stomach and make you feel full. But there were other medicines, just none of them were really amazing. And especially in my practice, I've never seen a lot of those medicines really do anything amazing, or at least any of them that made really big differences in my patients' lives. These new medicines seem promising. They are going to work a little bit more. They just did one study on a new medicine that is a dual GLP agonist and GIP agonist. It is FDA approved. It is, what is it, a long name. I don't like using the, I don't like using the brand names because I really don't believe in brand names for medications. I usually prefer people to use generics because I really don't see any point in having a brand name to a medication that's just a chemical. It is tirzepatide. It's been FDA approved for diabetes, but there was one recent study that was put out for weight loss that was a good number of people in it, and that seemed like that had really good results with it. So hopefully that medication will be used more and more for obesity. I've only used it really with one-ish patient, and that's because it is a very new medication. They do have downsides like everything. This is not going to be an extensive list. This is not going to be medical advice. This is only just some brief information. If you're thinking about these, please talk to them with your doctor because there's a longer list and they need to know your medical history before even considering these medications. But they have some downsides, which are pancreatitis. They can increase tumors of the thyroid. Most commonly, what I've seen in practice is stomach upset, GI upset. Most people get it. They feel painfully full or awkwardly full or nauseous full, or they just don't feel good. Their stomach is really bothering them, and that limits their use. Another negative that's more practical is most of these are injections. They're once-weekly injections. There is one semaglutide, which is a GLP-1 agonist, that does come in an oral pill form. That is the one I use more because most of my patients prefer taking a pill versus doing an injection. But I would say more doctors I've seen in practice use the injections. I don't know if there's a significant difference between the two, but usually I push more for the pills because of just convenience sake. Another big practical concern for these medications even though they work really well for diabetes and they're first line up there with metformin or very good medications for diabetes, especially people with cardiovascular disease, they are expensive. Most of them, if you're paying cash, even with a discount card, are between $800 and $1,300 a month, and that is insane in terms of medication costs. When you've got other medications for diabetes that cost $5 or $10 a month, why are you spending $1,300 a month to get a slight benefit? So that is something that limits patients. Another thing is, because they are so new, especially when being used for weight loss, insurance really doesn't like paying for them. So even if you have someone with insurance, it's getting more and more common now for insurances to pay for them, especially the ones that are FDA approved. But many times, especially with insurance companies that are not on the cutting edge of research or on everything that's FDA approved, or if you're using the dual GLP-1 GIP agonist, they're going to at least have some pushback, or it's going to be more of a struggle to get them approved. I usually have seen, for the ones that are FDA approved, usually at least a prior authorization, which is normal, but you still have to make sure you check off all the boxes, especially if you're going to be trying to do it for obesity. So even with insurance, they're a little bit harder to get than most medications, depending on the situation. But they do seem promising. I am, once again, hopefully optimistic because we have really struggled for years to find a good medication for weight loss that's been able to actually work for patients. This seems promising. One more negative, though, before I get too optimistic, is they're new. Like any new medication, they've only had a few studies. Now, the studies have had lots of people taking them, and they look for side effects, they look for negatives, but we don't have long-term studies, we don't have long-term side effects, and a lot of times miracle drugs come and then all of a sudden we see in 5 and 10 years some really bad side effects that we didn't see initially, or new data comes out that contradicts older studies, because sometimes the initial studies are flawed, or let's say the initial studies see more of a correlation than later studies, and then medications get pulled. But fingers crossed these medications hopefully will not have that, and as more data comes out, we can learn more about their safety and efficacy. So I think they're very interesting. If you're thinking about possibly trying one of these medications, talk to your doctor. I can't emphasize that enough. This is not medical advice. This is a church, and we're talking about education, not medical advice. So please go to your doctor, say, hey, I heard about these medications. What do you think about them? Are they appropriate for me? Are they not appropriate for me? And have a longer individualized discussion. That's it for this. If you guys want to see more health-related topics, let us know. If you want to see more morality topics or any other topics for our Sunday lectures, really we want education, morality, anything that we really stand for in terms of, finding truth and all that good stuff. So let us know on the comments in our Reddit, on our Discord. That's it for this lecture. Once again, I'm Dr. Frank with the Church of Rational Truth, signing off.